Hi everybody, today's lesson is going to be on rule of law. Now, rule of law isn't one necessarily set definition, but rather a lot of ideas that go into one big idea. So let's go on and explore what rule of law is and how it impacts what we think about government. Our objectives today are that you're going to understand the term rule of law and that you'll understand why we have laws to begin with. And the standards we're going to be covering are 5.1.C.A, 5.1.C.B, 5.1.C.C, and 5.1.C.D. Our essential questions for today are: why is government necessary, and why is written law important? Alright, so what is rule of law? Remember, I said at the beginning that rule of law isn't necessarily one specific set definition, but rather a bunch of ideas that kind of go into one bigger idea, rule of law. So what are some of those key parts? Rule of law is the idea that every citizen is governed by the same laws. So within one country, every citizen in that country has to follow the same laws. It's not different for one group over another group. In addition to that, these laws must be applied fairly and equally in a judicial process. So if somebody does something wrong and somebody else does the same thing wrong, they're going to be judged the same and fairly, based on what the laws say. As a result, disputes in society can be resolved fairly and peacefully. How does rule of law fit in with the term democracy that we've been discussing? Remember, in a democracy, the power of government comes from the people. People are the ones that give the government power to do things, and the government protects the people in return. It's a give and take, it's an exchange. So with a rule of law, the government makes a system of laws to protect its citizens. When the government applies the laws fairly and justly, this gives the government what's called legitimacy, which basically means it kind of makes it real or valid. So if the government makes these laws and they don't apply to everybody, it's not exactly fair and just, and people probably aren't going to be happy with it. And so they might actually want to change the government altogether. So by following these and making them the same for everybody, really makes it a much more authentic and real government. Okay, so what are some of the key factors that make up rule of law? Remember, not one specific definition, but rather a bunch of ideas that go into this. So one of the things is the government is bound and ruled by laws. So not only does the government put the laws into action, but they have to follow them too. The idea of equality before the law, every citizen within that government has the same equality. Nobody's treated any different than anybody else. Establishing law and order, so not only putting those laws into action, but making sure there's some sort of element that can put those laws into practice and to judge people based on those laws. So including a police force and a court system would be kind of two big examples for that. Efficient use of justice, so making sure that the laws are judged fairly in the court system, that people understand what they mean, but also that it is used properly and that it is used quickly and efficiently. As well as the protection of human rights. That's kind of the last one. Now, different countries have different ideas about human rights and what people are entitled to. The United States is considered to be one of the most free countries in terms of human rights. Other countries, perhaps such as an example like North Korea, not going to be considered very high on the scale for human rights. So rule of law includes a few other things as well. One of them is the idea of order and security. So laws are created to make order, and law enforcement and the judicial system put that law into action and put it into practice. So for example, if a law is put into place on driving speed limits, we know that we have to follow that speed limit, and if we don't, the police could potentially pull us over. If they do and we are found to have actually gone over the speed limit, then we might end up in court. You might even lose your license depending on how far over the speed limit you went. So that would be an example. Laws give us rules that we have to follow, and law enforcement and the judicial system help put that into practice, make sure we follow them. Another idea is checks and balances. This means that no one part of the government can have too much power. So our government is divided into three branches: the judicial, executive, and legislative branches. And we're going to learn more about all three of those branches as the year goes on. But in checks and balances, not one of those branches has all the power. They all work together, and in the term of a check, they can all do something over one of the other branches to make sure that the other branches don't have all of the power or try to take all of the power. And the last thing is, law is applied equally and fairly to everyone, and everyone has access to justice. So that's kind of a theme that we've been talking about since we started this lesson, that everybody is treated fairly and equally, everybody's treated the same, and if you are accused of doing something wrong, you have the right to be treated fairly and go through the court system. So do we have the rule of law in the United States? Yes, we definitely do. We know that everyone's rights will be respected and that we are guaranteed liberty, which is different types of freedoms, and we are also guaranteed equality of opportunity. So we all have the same opportunity in this country. Okay, so does rule of law exist everywhere? No, it doesn't. And we're going to look at this map and a few examples to kind of show how that's the case. So basically this map is divided into three colors, green, yellow, and red, and it's based on kind of the freedoms that exist throughout the world. And the ones that are most free are really ones considered to have rule of law, and they're going to be the green ones. Yellow has some freedoms, maybe not so good on all of them. Red, definitely not considered free in different ways. So one of the things that they look into for this are civil liberties, which are freedoms that the government cannot take away. And the other category that they look at when making this map are political rights. And those are the rights of citizens to participate in the government. So how do these governments handle those two categories is going to kind of develop how they show up on this map as free, kind of free, or not so free. So let's highlight our first example. Now in these examples, the country that we're looking at is going to show up blue, not green, yellow, or red. So keep that in mind. Now, the country that we're looking at first is the United States, our own country, and that country shows up as green on that bigger map. And the United States is considered to be one of the most free countries in the entire world. That's because we have a constitution, we as citizens have the ability to vote, we have a Bill of Rights that protects our freedoms and civil liberties, and our ability to participate in our own government. Our next example is going to be the country Haiti, again showing up blue on our map. On that bigger map, it's going to show up as yellow, so one of those that's considered partially free. Now, some of the reasons that they're considered to be a good country are because they do have elections, but one of the bad things is that there's a lot of corruption in their politics, so people aren't necessarily honest and fair. They also do not have a very strong judicial system, so their court system isn't very strong, once again is kind of corrupt. They do have religious freedom, typically. However, they don't have much freedom of assembly, so you can't necessarily gather with other people to share your thoughts and opinions publicly and get the government to listen to you. Our last example that we're going to look at is North Korea. Once again, it's blue on our map, but on the bigger map it would be red because it's considered to be not free at all. And it's actually one of the worst countries according to this map for civil liberties and political rights being protected. Now this country has a dictator. They do have elections, but nobody opposes their dictator. And even though there are elections, if people try to vote for somebody outside of the main political party, they could get in trouble. Things like the media are run by the government, so people don't necessarily get more than the government's opinion on different topics. There's no freedom of assembly. You can't gather with others to share your opinions on what the government's doing. And there's a lot of reports of human rights crimes. Alright everybody, so we've come to the end of our lesson on rule of law. Now we've learned that rule of law encompasses a lot of different things such as order and security, having equality, liberties, freedoms, everybody is treated fairly. So those are some of the big key elements of rule of law. If you've got any questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer them for you. Don't forget to complete the assignment that is underneath of this on our Moodle page, and I look forward to seeing you in live class. Have a great day.